So the shadow. The shadow. Been doing a lot of work with the shadow lately, with a lot of people. Lots been going on. Reminded by something that I say often, the greater the light, the greater the shadow. You know, if you think about the noonday sun and how bright and blazing that could be, especially in the middle of, say, summertime, you know, and just all how people seek the shadow, right? It's a very interesting analogy, just kind of think about that, how people love that there's a time when the shadow serves us, and that's what we've been talking about lately. I love the fact that people are beginning to embrace the shadow. And what does that mean if that's somewhat, so for someone who's the first time hearing, what is the shadow? What is it? The shadow self essentially was coined by Carl Jung, the psychologist. And it was really about looking at the deeper and the darker sides of humanity, of our psyche primarily. I like to associate what the shadow is. It's the skeletons in the closet. It's the things that we don't really want to look at, or the things that we want to kind of put behind us, or we don't want, or if we want to use the analogy of hiding things in the dark. And that's what the shadow is, very much of. It's the stuff that people like to stuff down and put away and not let other people see or touch. So one of the keen understandings in terms of really learning about your life and learning about moving through is understanding what your shadow side is. What are the things that you're wanting to deal with in life that have a huge opportunity to teach you the basic lessons, as we spoke last time, in non-attachment. So being not attached to a set belief system or core ideas about who you think you are. Because we're constantly working on that anyways. We're in this process of understanding the mind, as well as what this soul journey is for many of us that are drawn to this type of conversation. And I see many people wanting to simply move from the pain and the heartache and all of that hard stuff that has been in their lives, whether it was from their childhood or from their teenage years. And trust me, we all have them. Everybody has the exact same story. And essentially it comes down to whether or not someone was loved enough, supported enough, touched enough, physically held and cared for as a child or a young adult, and abandoned, whether or not they were abandoned. And many of us probably have an abandonment story over and over again. So those are the things that lie within the shadow of ourselves. Those are the things that once we go through the experience, our ego, what it does is it learns and it begins to categorize not just positive and negative experiences, but then it begins to place judgment of good and bad, or right and wrong. And the job of the ego is to help us maneuver around those types of shadow experiences, those painful experiences, as much as possible. Oftentimes, though, the ego goes into a place of wanting to make it altogether disappear. And so what happens is deep down here and working, if you're kind of in the chakras, understanding of what chakras do, your first and second and third chakras are your shadow houses, because they're directly connected with your physical experience. They are here to do just that. And oftentimes people stuff energy down in these lower chakras and then close the lid or close the chakra. So many people are walking around with very tight or closed lower sections of their energy body. And so when you begin to do shadow work, when you begin to look deeper again, when you begin to take the lid off the can and start looking, seeing what's in there, or open the door to the dark rooms and start shining some light in there, it's amazing what one can see. Those things in and of themselves are energy. Many of them happen to be negative energy influences. But there's life in that. Everything's energy. Everything is living. And so eventually it's going to want to, if just think about something that's alive, that you put in a dark room for years. What's going to happen with it? Well, one, it's going to begin to fester and grow, and it may die for a while, but then what happens? New life kind of takes over. It gets moldy, it gets rotten, it begins to smell. All of these things happen within us in terms of energy. I know it's kind of a funky kind of analogy, but that's really what it is. And when we start to take the lid off of that and people start looking into it, they go, whoa, holy cow, I didn't realize that was that bad, and that's gotten a lot worse over time. And what happens is the ego uses this ability to kind of hold these memories in an effort to kind of navigate around these experiences so that we don't have them again. But the irony is, because we're holding them in, all we can do is draw those experiences back towards us or create new experiences of it. Because going back to the first talk, everything's energy as well. So, and what we carry within us is what we extend outside of us. It's what we also attract to us. So shadow work in and of itself is about looking at all that stuff. It's about cleaning up and clearing. And how do we do that? People go, what do I do then? And I say, well, now first we look at what is. And we look at those events of our lives. And instead of trying to point the blame or figure out why someone had done something to harm us or hurt us, being able to go into place to go, what did I learn about that? And what is the lesson here further for me to learn? And oftentimes I'll say, well, the opposite of shadow is light. So as you draw more light into that, and you speak to that side of the conversation, you begin to work in the areas of accepting, of letting go, of forgiving, which is huge work. The deepest and most profound work in terms of healing the being itself and clearing out these rooms is working in the realms of forgiving those who have hurt us or those who we perceive have hurt us, which is a very big difference, but garners the same result of suffering. So just looking at the shadow and shining more light in that space. And eventually what happens is the shadow is exposed, it gets longer, it gets deeper, but eventually it gets transmuted and transformed into something new. And that's what I feel is the process for shifting negative experiences into more positive forces. And anybody who's been through that process, who's been willing to look deep and hard at their life, and two, not just the stuff that has happened to you, but the shadow you have casted upon others. Because that happens a lot more often as well. So you go, oh, I've done that, and I've done that. And so in order to forgive the self and the other, you begin to move into a place of greater, more positive light energy, which garners an amazing effect of expansion and of growth, and why I think we're here in the first place, to experience it all and to learn from it, and for consciousness to have this experience of itself in both the light as well as the dark. I do believe we'll always have the both, even if we move up into the fifth dimensional world. As long as there's life, there's always going to be shadow, but it's how we'll work with it, and how we'll understand it, and how we'll not allow it to imprison us in a world of suffering. That we can go, oh, there's my shadow. Hello. Welcome, old friend. What have you got to teach me today? And you walk with it.